Imagine being left on a lonely island. No people, no rescue, no way home. Only the crash of waves, the screams of wild animals, and the slow silence of despair. For 4 long years, one man faced this nightmare alone. His struggle was so unbelievable, it became the legend behind Robinson Crusoe. But before it was a story, it was real. And it was terrifying. Waves crashed endlessly against the rocks. The jungle groaned with strange voices in the night. And on the empty shore, one man stood alone, marooned, abandoned, and forgotten. The year was 1704. His name was Alexander Selkirk, a Scottish sailor whose stubborn choice had sealed his fate. He had demanded to be left on this island, believing the ship was doomed. But as its sails vanished over the horizon, the weight of reality crushed him. In his hands, he carried only a musket, a hatchet, a small pot, a Bible, and a bundle of clothes. Against the vast emptiness of the ocean, these items felt like nothing. The nights were the worst. Darkness swallowed the land, while shrieks of unseen creatures echoed through the trees. Rats scratched at his feet as he tried to sleep. Every sound reminded him that he was no longer part of the world. Regret burned in his chest. He thought of ending his life, of escaping the silence forever. Yet hunger forced him to rise, and instinct began to whisper the oldest command of all: survive. Was this man destined to survive, or destined to vanish into history? The story takes us back to 1676, in a small Scottish village. A restless boy named Alexander Selkirk grew up with fire in his heart. He disobeyed, argued, and refused to bend to rules. Trouble seemed to follow him wherever he went. But what happens when a restless spirit meets the open sea? At 27, Selkirk joined the expedition of the famous William Dampier in 1703. These were not peaceful voyages. They carried letters of marque, licenses to hunt and plunder enemy ships in the War of the Spanish Succession. Gold, spices, and survival were all at stake. Yet adventure never comes without danger. Around the deadly waters of Cape Horn, storms tore their fleet apart. Men clung to life as their ships cracked in the violent waves. And what happens when fear meets poor leadership? Selkirk served under Captain Thomas Straddling, a man he distrusted. Again and again, they clashed. French ships attacked, Spanish patrols closed in, and Straddling pushed forward blindly. The crew's faith began to crumble. By the time they reached the lonely Juan Fernandez Islands, Selkirk's doubts reached a breaking point. Sometimes the greatest prison has no walls at all. After endless arguments, Selkirk made his choice. He told Captain Straddling he would rather face the island than sail on a doomed ship. Straddling did not hesitate. He left Selkirk ashore, and within moments, the sailor begged to return. But the captain turned his back. The ship's sails faded, and Selkirk was truly alone. What happens when silence becomes your only companion? The ocean thundered at his feet. Birds screamed above. But no human voice answered him. The emptiness pressed on his chest until he could barely breathe. At night, the scratching of rats on his skin kept him awake, each bite a reminder that the island wanted him broken. What can a man cling to when hope is gone? He carved out a cave for shelter. He dug up roots, chewed bitter plants, and forced himself to eat. His Bible became his only voice. Each prayer he spoke into the darkness was a desperate attempt to keep his mind alive. But despair never stays silent for long. Loneliness grew heavier each day, whispering temptations of surrender. Sometimes salvation wears the mask of terror. It began with a sound, deep roars rolling across the beach. Within days, hordes of sea lions flooded the shore for mating season. They barked, fought, and blocked every path to food and water. Selkirk had no choice. He turned his back on the ocean and walked into the unknown. What waits for a man when he steps deeper into the wilderness? Beyond the trees, he found a hidden valley. Wild turnips grew thick in the soil. Cabbage palms towered overhead. Fruits dangled within reach, sweet and alive with color. And in the distance, he saw movement, feral goats, left long ago by pirates. What can a man do with only a musket and fading strength? At first, he hunted them with gunpowder, but when the last shot was fired, he changed. He learned to chase them down on foot, leaping over rocks, tackling them with his bare hands. Some he killed for meat. Others he tamed, drawing milk from their udders to keep himself alive. One chase nearly ended him. He slipped on a cliff, crashing down with bones screaming in pain. Only the goat he pursued broke his fall, and saved his life. When man is stripped of society, even predators can become allies. What happens when the night itself turns against you? Rats poured into Selkirk's hut. They gnawed at his hands, his feet, even his face while he slept. Each bite carried the threat of infection, the slow death of fever and rot. He could not fight them all. But then, an answer came from the shadows. Wild cats, descendants of strays left by old sailors, prowled the island. Selkirk began to feed them scraps. Slowly, they crept closer, until one night they curled at his side. From then on, the rats dared not cross the line of their glowing eyes. What does a man become when his family is made of animals? By day, goats gave him meat and milk. By night, cats guarded his sleep. Together, they formed a strange circle of survival. Selkirk stitched clothes from goat skins, his beard uncut, his muscles carved by hard labor. His reflection, if he had one, would show not a sailor, but something wild. Half man, half beast, shaped by the island itself. Years slid by, each season carving him deeper into this new form. Yet, in his chest, a single hope refused to die. Hope can turn to horror in the blink of an eye. 4 years, Selkirk's only company had been goats and cats. Then one morning, sails cut across the horizon. His heart pounded. Could this be the rescue he prayed for? But what happens when salvation wears the wrong flag? The ships were Spanish. Selkirk knew what that meant: chains, torture, and the endless darkness of salt mines. He ran into the jungle, desperate to vanish among the trees. But the soldiers saw him. Muskets fired. The chase was on. Where can a man hide when death hunts him? Selkirk scrambled up a tall tree, pressing his body against the branches. Below, soldiers searched the undergrowth. One even stopped at the base of the trunk, laughing as he relieved himself. Selkirk held his breath, every muscle locked, as seconds stretched like hours. At last, the soldiers gave up, their footsteps fading back to the shore. The ships sailed away, carrying freedom with them. Selkirk was safe, but still trapped. His chance had slipped through his fingers, leaving only silence, and the endless weight of more years alone. 4 years alone can change a man into something unrecognizable. What happens to a body shaped only by survival? By his 4th year, Selkirk was no longer the sailor who once begged to leave a ship. He could chase goats barefoot across sharp volcanic rock, leaping over cliffs with the speed of a hunter. His hands were scarred, his skin darkened by the sun, his frame lean but unshakably strong. He climbed trees like a cat, quick and agile, moving as if the island itself had trained him. What happens to a mind that speaks only to itself? His Bible became his anchor. Each day he read aloud, forcing his tongue to remember the shape of words. Without it, silence might have swallowed his reason. His thoughts balanced on the thin line between faith and madness. What does such isolation make a man look like? His clothes were long gone. Goat skins covered his body, his beard hung thick, his hair tangled like wild vines. To any stranger, he would appear less human than beast. And yet, he never let hope die. Each day, he lit signal fires, watching the horizon with eyes that refused to surrender. Sometimes salvation comes wearing a familiar face. What would you feel after 4.5 years alone? One morning, Selkirk's eyes caught sight of sails on the horizon. He studied the rigging. They were British. His heart thundered. Could this finally be rescue? He sprinted to the shore, built a blazing fire, and waved with all his strength. This time, the ships turned toward him. What would men see when they met a sailor turned wild? The landing party stepped onto the beach and froze. Before them stood a ragged figure, barefoot, draped in goat skins, his beard long and tangled. His body was lean, scarred, and hardened by years of survival. At first, they did not recognize him as human. But when he spoke, the truth struck them. It was Alexander Selkirk. And the captain who greeted him was William Dampier, the very man whose voyage had once marooned him. Woodes Rogers, captain of the Duke, laughed and named Selkirk the governor of the island. Selkirk shared his goat diet, saving sailors sick with scurvy. At last, after years of silence and struggle, he was free. After years in silence, Selkirk's roar returned with fury. What happens when a man who conquered solitude is set free on the sea again? Selkirk stepped back onto the deck not as a broken castaway, but as a hardened survivor. At Guayaquil in Ecuador, he led fearless raids, charging upriver with fire in his eyes. Gold, jewels, and treasure meant nothing compared to the thrill of victory. What does a man do with skills carved by survival itself? His speed and sharp instincts made him unstoppable. In Mexico, he joined the capture of powerful Spanish galleons, ships heavy with silver and riches. His talent for navigation guided fleets through treacherous waters, earning him respect as one of the finest sailors of his time. What reward waits for a man who outruns death itself? In 1711, after years of storms and battles, Selkirk completed a full circumnavigation of the globe. When he returned to England, crowds swarmed to hear his tale. They looked at him not as a sailor, but as a legend. He was the man who had stared down loneliness and survived when no one else could. Sometimes the line between history and legend vanishes. What happens when one man's suffering becomes the world's story? Alexander Selkirk's years of isolation did not fade into silence. They rose again in the pages of Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, a novel that carried his ordeal into every corner of the world. Readers gasped at the tale of a man alone against nature, never knowing it was born from truth. But Selkirk's mark was not only on paper. Centuries later, Chile renamed Isla Marzafura to Alejandro Selkirk Island, carving his memory into the very map of the seas. His name would live where his footsteps once echoed. What does his story teach us today? That survival is more than food or fire. It is the unbroken will to endure, to adapt, and to rise stronger than despair. Selkirk was marooned to die, but instead, he became proof of what the human spirit can endure. He stepped onto that island as a sailor. He left it as a legend, living evidence that the greatest adventure is survival itself.